Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of Tiger Talk, where we bring you the faces behind Fort Hays State. My name is Omar Alvarez, alongside Brian Groth. Today, we'll be talking about the latest happenings of the UFC. Welcome along, Brian.
Thank you for having me. Well, let's get into UFC. What is UFC?
Man, obviously. Well, I mean, I guess if you aren't aware, UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. It was Dana White is the president and CEO of this Ultimate Fighting Championship. They're based out of Las Vegas. They were actually amid all this COVID stuff. You know, COVID kind of shut down the whole world. Let's see, was it March? March, I believe.
Yep.
Middle
March.
week of March. And the first things first, UFC president Dana White, he's good friends with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump told him not to worry about it. And so the mission that UFC had from that point on was to get back like as soon as possible. And so they hosted their first UFC event in May, I believe, the second or third week of May, UFC 247. And they were the first professional sport to come back, and that'll kind of piggyback into what our first couple topics will be, which are the lightweight. But the main event of that fight was supposed to be Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undefeated lightweight champion. He used to be the lightweight champion. He's now retired since. But originally it was supposed to be Tony Ferguson, who's a big lightweight contender, going up against Khabib. But Khabib, he's originally from Dagestan, Russia, and he was in Russia getting ready for the fight. Well, all this COVID breaks out, and now Khabib can't get to the USA because of all the restrictions. So Justin Gaethje, which is I think probably one of the more he was one of the more underrated lightweight contenders, takes his fight on 10 days notice, I think, and completely flattens Tony Ferguson. And knocks him out in the fifth round. It was pretty interesting to watch because that whole fight, you don't see the same Tony Ferguson that you had seen before. Tony Ferguson, he was on I believe a 12-fight win streak leading up to this fight. And the funny thing about him not being able to face Khabib is it was actually the fourth time, I believe, that Tony was supposed to fight Khabib, but something came up. Khabib got injured one, Tony got injured one, and then COVID happened, and then there was something else that happened. I think there was a couple more injuries to Tony. But yeah, it's almost like the gods did not want this fight to happen. So it was going to be for Tony was going to fight Khabib for the lightweight championship, but instead he ended up fighting Justin Gaethje for the interim lightweight championship, which is just kind of like there's a champion and there's an interim champion. It would become the interim champion, then that earns you the right to face the champion, basically, is what that boils down to. So being that Justin beat Tony, he became the interim champion, and that set him up to face Khabib. And they faced off, they faced off a beginning of the year. I want to say it was in September, October, that they faced off, Khabib and Justin. And holy cow, like, Khabib is arguably the most dominant fighter that the UFC has ever seen. I think he's only lost one round in the UFC, which, I mean, the UFC is the top tier of mixed martial arts. You know, there's other organizations like Bellator, ONE FC. There's other fight organizations. There's a lot of fighting organizations. But UFC is definitely that's where the cream of the crop goes. And so Khabib has just been dominant. Again, he's only lost one round. He faced Justin Gaethje, and Justin Gaethje was probably stylistically the most likely to be able to take down Khabib. But even then, if you watch the fight, I mean, it only went 2 rounds. But the first round, it took probably all of Justin Gaethje's strength to even last with Khabib. The dude is just like, his cardio is so good. He's big on sambo, and sambo is really big on grappling. And Justin Gaethje, I mean, he wasn't a slouch wrestler himself. He was a Division II wrestler, a Division II All-American wrestler. So I mean, he has a big grappling background, and also he's just a heavy striker. So he's kind of a complete package. When you face off against Khabib, when anybody's faced off against Khabib, you know exactly what he's going to do, because if you watch any of Khabib's fights, he rarely does he stand and strike with you. He'll stand and strike with you for a little bit. You know, he'll set up his jabs, throw in a couple combos, but primarily he's just a grappler. He holds the record for the most takedowns in a fight in the UFC. I believe it's at 19 in one fight. It's insane. But, I mean, a lot of people think he's a boring fighter because he just sits there and he just holds on to you. It's essentially what he does if you watch any of his fights. Like if you watch the Conor McGregor fight, that's what he did. If you watch the Justin Gaethje fight, that's kind of what he did. If you watch his fights against Edson Barboza, against anybody he faces, he just grapples with you. He won't stand and trade with you. But the thing about him is that he just knows how to grapple so well that he can just dominate anybody. He ended up wearing down Justin Gaethje in the first round, and then grappled with him in the second round and took him to the ground. Had a nice little double leg, set him up for a triangle, and I mean he just made him unconscious. So I mean it was insane knowing the level of talent that Justin Gaethje has going up against Khabib, and the fact that Khabib dominated in a way that nobody would see possible, especially against a guy like Justin Gaethje, because that dude's a tough son of a gun. So now Justin Gaethje, now that he lost Khabib, that was for the lightweight title. Now they're in a couple months. Charles Oliveira is going off against Michael Chandler for the lightweight title, and the winner of that is probably going to face Justin Gaethje for that lightweight title. So Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira, tremendous fighters. Michael Chandler, actually, he's only had one fight in the UFC. It was against Dan Hooker, who's ranked 8th in the lightweight rankings. And, he was, I believe, the champion in Bellator, if I'm not mistaken. The lightweight champion in Bellator came up to the UFC, knocked out Dan Hooker. Now he's going to face Charles Oliveira, for the lightweight title, I believe UFC 262. So that'll be in May. Yep, that'll be in May. It might be the latter stages of April as well. I'd have to double check. But yeah, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler. Charles Oliveira, Charles Du Bronx Oliveira, that's his nickname. Extremely, extremely good grappler. The dude has his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's on his own win streak of his own. He actually just came off of a victory against Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, I think he's kind of getting towards the ending stages of his career. But Charles Oliveira faced off against Tony Ferguson a couple months ago and just absolutely dominated him. I think there was one round when they scored it 26-30. It was only supposed to be a 3-round fight. And, if you lose a round, if you win a round in the UFC, you get 10 points on the judges' scorecard. You lose a round, the highest you can get is 9 in the judges' eyes for the round. But if you get absolutely dominated, you get 8s in there. So normally rounds go 10-9, 10-9, 10-9 for a regular fight. But no, it was a couple rounds. I believe one round, it went 10-8. That's how badly Charles dominated him. It was just like seeing kind of like an amateur grappler take on a world-class black belt. Charles about submitted him at the end of the first round with an armbar that was nasty. I mean, I think he was about to snap the thing off. If you've seen pictures of it, it kind of went viral on social media for a little bit. But, yeah, it was insane. And then Michael Chandler, I mean, when he faced Dan Hooker, I mean, he knocked him out in the second round. I mean, the dude just got heavy hands. So it's going to be interesting to see because Charles Oliveira isn't a slouch striker, but he's also, I don't think he just doesn't have the power that Michael Chandler has. So I wonder if Charles Oliveira is going to try to utilize his grappling more. So that'll be interesting to see. So when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the lightweights and dip into the heavyweights when we come back.
Matthew.
Most of us like to be out in the sun. That's why sunscreen and other safety measures are key from aging and cancer. The FDA recommends using a sunscreen with an SPF of 15 or higher. Also, look for broad spectrum on the label. That means both harmful ultraviolet A and B rays are blocked. Remember, SPF plus broad spectrum equal healthy fun in the sun. Visit www.fda.gov/sunscreen for more information. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
When it comes to vaping, the truth can get clouded. So let's make it clear. Vaping is not safe for youth.
Because vaping can put microscopic into your lungs.
And dangerous things like metals into your body.
And nicotine, which can harm a person's brain development through their mid-20s.
With appealing flavors, high nicotine levels, and lots of promotion on social media,
many kids think vaping is harmless, but it's not.
So talk to your kids about the risks of vaping.
Because when you talk, they hear you.
Learn more at underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Welcome back to Tiger Talk, ladies and gentlemen, where we bring you the faces behind 4-Day State. Again, I'm Omar Alvarez alongside Brian Groth, and again, we're continuing our talks about the UFC. On back to the lightweights, Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. That'll be a great fight. That'll be headlining UFC 262. You also got to throw into the mix Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. They squared off a month and a half ago, where it was a second fight. that where these two had faced each other, but it was 5 years apart. The first fight, Conor McGregor knocked out Dustin Poirier in the first round, and in this second fight, Dustin Poirier knocked Conor McGregor out in the second round, and that sets up a third fight that'll take place in July, undisclosed location, but it'll be Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier 3 that'll square off there, and that'll be an interesting fight in and of itself. Not only it's going to be the third fight between these two, Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor will always be, pretty good lightweight contender. Dustin Poirier is actually the number one contender for the lightweight title, but I think a big motivator that you have to think about with the UFC is money. And if there's something you know about the UFC, even if you know not a whole lot about the UFC, you probably know a thing or two about Conor McGregor, because that guy just talks and talks and talks, and he backed it up for the longest time ever. That's what got his notoriety. That's where he got his fame, by talking, and now he's the highest paid mixed martial artist, I think, so far in history, because now with mixed martial arts being as popular as it is, there's a lot of money being thrown into the UFC, and it's definitely been invested into Conor McGregor, because that guy had a nice payday for that fight. I believe he got paid a purse of $5 million. I mean that's on top of, like, I believe if you headline a UFC event, then you get a share of the pay-per-views, and you get a share of the merchandise too, I think. But yeah, the dude's slinging in some money. So Dustin Poirier, I think he's made the right decision there, because he just looked unstoppable against Conor McGregor. He took a couple shots here and there, but he really broke. Conor McGregor was he still is a tremendous striker, but Dustin Poirier just outclassed him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that third fight. And you got to think, if Dustin Poirier wins, it'll set him up. It'll definitely set him up to be well, he's already contender for the lightweight title, but I just wonder. It'll be interesting to see what the UFC does, because it'll be Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler for the title. Justin Gaethje will fight him, and who knows the winner of that? Either Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, or Michael Chandler will face Dustin Poirier or Conor McGregor for the lightweight title again, which Conor McGregor has already been the champion in that division. We'll switch on to division. Speaking about the heavyweights, my goodness. Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou faced off 2 weeks ago for the heavyweight title. It was the second time these two met. If you don't know Francis Ngannou, he's from Cameroon. He's 6'5", and the dude's like 265 pounds of just solid muscle. And if you don't know anything about Francis Ngannou, so he grew up very poor. He was working in the coal mines, I believe, at the age of 10. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience. Excuse me. And he talked a little bit about his upbringing, and it's very humbling, because he would go to school, and then he'd go work in the coal mines on different days. So I think he'd work there like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He wouldn't go to school on Saturday and Sunday, but still, you're a kid and you're working in a coal mine, and on top of that, he had to deal with poverty, and just what he would talk about. I remember him talking about how if he wanted something for school, like there's times where he'd come and he didn't have a pencil or a pen or anything to use, and they would just send him home, because they said, well, what use do you have here if you don't have a pen or a pencil? You don't have anything to write with, you don't have anything to write on. So they would just send him home, and he would get embarrassed, and he said he felt really bad because he couldn't make friends because he didn't have any money, and he felt that to have friends, you'd have to, they'd have to be mutually beneficial. So he said he was pretty alone for most of his life. But now, fast forward, and he's a UFC heavyweight champion, and he's got plenty of money. So yeah, he fought Stipe Miocic, who is widely regarded as the best heavyweight of all time. And the first matchup between these two was, I want to say it was 3 years ago. Francis Ngannou, when he was on the rise, when he was knocking people out left and right. He still is knocking people out left and right. Every single fight that he's been in, that he's won, has not gone the distance. But in this first round, in the first matchup between Stipe and Francis, Stipe actually took the victory there, despite the heavy hands of Francis. And you really got to credit that to Stipe's ground game. He was able to take Francis down and control him, which led to a unanimous decision victory. I believe it was 30-27 in those 3 rounds. So, and this Francis Ngannou went on like a 4-fight knockout streak. I believe. Well, he knocked out Alistair Overeem, knocked out Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Let's see, Junior Dos Santos. He knocked him out, and I'm not sure if it was before or after, but he knocked out Andrei Arlovski. Andre Arlovski was kind of in the latter stages of his career at that point in time. But he was on a 4-fight win streak, knocking people out left and right. And then it set him up for this title fight against Stipe Miocic again. And that was 2 weeks ago. And holy cow, if you just see if you watched both fights one right after another, you just know the difference in Francis Ngannou's fight game. First round, I wouldn't say it was even, but it was definitely more in favor of Francis than Stipe. Stipe tried grappling, but Francis just showed his takedown defense, which is something he lacked in the first matchup. And so he stuffed a takedown in the first round, handed Stipe some heavy shots, and almost knocked him out. And then in the second round, Stipe got Francis with a pretty clean right cross, and Stipe got a little bit ahead of himself and kind of put his guard down. Thought he had Francis hurt, and then Francis saw the opening, hit Stipe with a left hook, and knocked him out. It was a pretty bad knockout. Now he's now the third current UFC champion that is from Africa, so that's pretty awesome to see. The other champions being Kamaru Usman and Israel Adesanya, all from Africa. And the Francis win is going to could possibly set up what would be probably the biggest fight in UFC history, in my opinion, and widely regarded as could be the biggest fight in UFC history, as per Joe Rogan as well. So Francis Ngannou could, he's going to stay at heavyweight, but John Jones, the probably one of the most dominant light heavyweight champions in history, was going to move up to heavyweight to face whoever the champion is, whether it was going to be Stipe or Francis. And John Jones, of course, he's been at light heavyweight his whole career, but he's been dominant there. He's only had one loss. And the only reason he has a loss was because he was throwing down illegal elbows, according to a referee. So his only blemish was not because he was dominated, but because of the rules of the UFC. So he wanted to move up to heavyweight. And assuming he wins the heavyweight championship, I mean, that just kind of secures his legacy as probably the greatest fighter of all time, because that's what he's regarded as, the greatest fighter of all time, because the dude is just talented. He can strike, he can grapple, and this fight against Ngannou is just going to be insane if it actually happens. The problem is that John Jones wants more money. So, I mean, you're talking Conor McGregor money. He gets $5 million. His most recent fight, he got $5 million. But John Jones is talking along the lines of getting like $50 million. It's insane. And so that's what's been stopping him. He was on Steve-O's podcast, Steve-O from Wild Boys and, the movie. Yeah. Yeah. He was on Steve-O's podcast, and he said that he feels that he's undervalued by the UFC. And he wants to get paid what he feels like he's getting paid, or what he needs, what he feel like he deserves, which I guess you can make an argument, but at the same time, I mean, holy cow, you don't think if you're in the UFC you're not making enough, but I guess to each their own. If he wants money, he wants money. So that's just such an interesting fight too, because Francis is just a pure striker. That's what he got famous from. I mean, he was just starching dudes left and right. So he's actually the hardest. They did a study on him. He's the hardest puncher. I mean, not that they've studied, people left and right, but he's the hardest puncher in the world. Getting punched by Francis, I believe is what they said, is getting hit by a Chevy Cruze going 60 miles an hour, or going as fast as it can, I believe. And it's also the equivalent of getting hit with a sledgehammer when it's swung from, like, you swing it from the back of your head and swing it all the way downward. That's the equivalent of getting hit by Francis Ngannou. It's crazy. So nobody's been able to take his shots. He knocked out Stipe, knocked out Alistair Overeem, knocked out Andre Arlovski, knocked out Jairzinho Rozenstruik, knocked out Junior Dos Santos. It's insane. It'll set up a really great fight against John Jones. It'll be insane to see how that works out. So when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the heavyweights and then move into the welterweights when we come back.
It's okay. I just need you to listen to me.
I know that a lot of times, Mom, it might not seem like I'm listening, but I am. I hear you. And what you say really does matter to me.
I mean, let's be honest. No kid likes rules, but I get why we have them. I hear you, and I know it's because you care.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me. And believe it or not, they really do, especially at times that matter most.
Want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for talking and for ahead.
Thanks, Mom. And always being my biggest fan.
Know what you expect, so I can try to meet your expectations.
More information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other .samhsa.gov.
Welcome back to Tiger Talk, where we bring you the face behind Fort Hays State again. Omar Alvarez alongside Brian Groth. Just talked about the heavyweights. To wrap up with the heavyweights, John Jones and Francis Ngannou. I think stylistically, this favors Francis just because he has heavy hands, and I don't think nobody can take Francis Ngannou's hits. But a part of me wants to think that John Jones is kind of making the UFC pay discrepancy as an excuse to not face John Jones or to not face Francis. Because I think, regardless, I think Francis wins, however you look at it. I don't think John Jones is strong enough to take on Francis. I don't think John Jones can. He definitely can't stand a strike with Francis. So, and Stipe was a well-versed grappler himself. Not to say Stipe's better than John, because I think John Jones beats Stipe. But John Jones and Francis Ngannou, I think regardless, is going to come out. Francis Ngannou is going to have a knockout victory, or maybe not even. I don't think he'll submit John Jones, but I think Francis definitely wins by knockout pretty easily. I just don't think there's anybody in the UFC that can take Francis Ngannou at this point. It's going to be a while before Francis Ngannou is dethroned as the heavyweight champion. And speaking of African champions, Kamaru Usman, the UFC welterweight champion, he faced off against Gilbert Burns. He was actually, Brian, he was at that. He was the one we were watching when we were in Orlando.
Really?
Yeah. So that main event that we stayed and got pizza for. Yeah. So
I remember that.
Yeah, he was the main event. It was kind of funny because I fell asleep. You were asleep, and then I woke up, and then the main event was on. But holy cow, Kamaru Usman! It's actually pretty cool. So Kamaru Usman is a welterweight champion of the world for the UFC. He wrestled at Nebraska Kearney.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he got his sophomore year, he got bronze medal at Division II national championships. Junior year, he got silver, and then his senior year, he got gold.
Nice.
But he wrestled at Nebraska Kearney. So that's pretty cool. So, I mean, he was wrestling people from Fort Hays, I'm assuming. So, yeah, so he's a welterweight champion. He faced off against Gilbert Burns when we went to Florida. And he won. I don't want to say in dominant fashion, but it was really an interesting fight to see because Kamaru Usman, I mean, he's a well-versed grappler. Obviously, he's a Division II wrestler. I'm sure he earned All-American honors. Well, he did earn All-American honors, I believe, if you get like top 8 at the Division II championships. I don't know how it works. I was talking to a wrestler buddy of mine. But yeah, so anyways, he All-American wrestler, and he's also a really good striker too. So Gilbert Burns also is a full package. So they used to train together, I believe, with they were called the Black Zillions. They trained out of Florida, I believe Miami, Florida. Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns, and they were they were teammates, so they were working alongside each other, and then they had to face each other off. I mean, they were pretty good friends, and you had to throw that aside again in this event. But Kamaru Usman did come up with the victory, and the thing that made it interesting is the fact that Gilbert Burns, it's not that Kamaru Usman did anything super spectacular. What really won him the fight was his jab, and if you know anything about fighting, when you throw a jab, you're not looking to knock somebody out. You're just looking to gauge distance and to kind of make your opponent bite, if you know what I'm saying. Get them to flinch, get them to know, hey, you're here. And then if you get them to flinch, then you can catch them with whatever you want. If you get them off balance, if you make them flinch, you can throw an over the right, you can throw a kick, you can just do so many things off of a jab. But what Kamaru Usman did is he didn't just make Gilbert Burns faint. No, he basically, he knocked him to the ground several times with just a jab. And I mean, give credit to Kamaru just because the dude is so powerful. He stopped him with the jab, and not to say that he knocked him out with the jab, but he went southpaw actually, where your left foot is back, right foot forward, and then he just got him with the right jab plenty of times. And Gilbert Burns was trying to go in for some heavy shots, and Kamaru did a good job of stopping it with his jab. And I mean, if you really just want to stop a jab, you can either parry it or just dish it out, or not dish out, slip rather. So that's what made that fight interesting, is that Gilbert Burns, I think, was a better striker, but Kamaru Usman took him out with a jab, basically. He had him busted up with just a jab, and then knocked him down with a jab in the second round, and then finished him on the ground with a couple big shots. So Kamaru Usman remained the welterweight champion, and he's actually going to face Jorge Masvidal for a second time here in 2-3 weeks, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks. UFC 261, I believe, is going to be headlined by Jorge Masvidal and Kamaru Usman, which is another interesting fight because they faced off last July. I believe it was July 11th, day before my birthday. And, it was exactly what you'd expect from somebody that's a great wrestler versus somebody that's just a pure striker. Jorge Masvidal, Kamaru Usman, the first time they faced off, Kamaru Usman won in dominant fashion, and it wasn't so much that he extremely dominated the fight. It's just the fact that he had control of the fight. And what I mean by that is Kamaru Usman, obviously he's a well-versed grappler, but he just took Jorge down and just kind of controlled the fight. Jorge took the fight on 6 days' notice. So what essentially happened in the span of 6 days is Jorge had to fly. He's from Miami, Florida. He had to fly all the way to Abu Dhabi. He weighed at 190 something when he got to Abu Dhabi. He had to cut all the weight, so he had to cut all the way down to 170. So he lost 20 some odd pounds in 6 days. Had to lose 20 pounds in 6 days, 20 some odd pounds in 6 days. Weigh in and then take the fight. So I mean, it just took a huge toll on his body, and you really noted it in the fight. He was really wore down towards the last stages of the rounds. And he ended up, it's kind of crazy because one of the judges actually gave him the first round. The others, it was 50-45, 50-45, and then 49-46. So one judge actually had him winning a round, which if you're on 6 days' notice and facing a guy that had been training for months for a fight, it's still pretty impressive. So Jorge Masvidal and Kamaru Usman are going to square off again. And this time, I mean, and they've already had such a huge rivalry. So it'll be interesting to see the rematch just because there's a lot at stake here. Like Jorge Masvidal, he's going to fight for the welterweight title for the second time. His most recent fight being against Kamaru. But he's going to have a full training camp. And I think there's going to be a big difference in how Jorge Masvidal performs. But if Kamaru sticks with his strategy of just grappling, I just don't see Jorge winning it all. But Kamaru does want to get a little bit ahead of himself, and he says he wants to finish Jorge Masvidal. Now, I don't know if he means submission-wise, because Jorge Masvidal is a pretty tough guy to submit. I believe he's only been finished once in his career, and that was by a rare standing triangle choke. Actually went down as one of the best submissions in history because he got into triangle choke, stood up, and then some guy, I believe he tried going for a takedown. He ended up slipping off of him, got him in a triangle choke, and then got submitted while he was standing. It was crazy. But if it comes to striking, I think Jorge Masvidal definitely has the advantage. So I think there's two ways this fight will play out. Kamaru tries wrestling Jorge the whole time, in which case he'll be victorious, or he tries striking with Jorge, and I think Jorge has the advantage. But Kamaru, I think he's pretty underrated still as a champion, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And then that could possibly set up whoever wins Jorge Masvidal and Kamaru Usman this next lightweight title or welterweight title fight. I think that'll set up a good matchup against Colby Covington, who's also in contention. He dominated Tyron Woodley, who was a former champion, and he went he didn't go a full 5 rounds, but he went 5 rounds with Kamaru Usman and got knocked out in that 5th round with like a minute to go. And honestly, I think it was an early stoppage. But Colby Covington is a really good fighter, and I think if there's a tough test for Kamaru again, it'll be Colby Covington, just because Kamaru knows he's a good grappler, so he doesn't want to grapple with him too much, but he also knows he's a good striker because he was able to stand and strike with him for the full 5 rounds. And there's something about Kamaru that he's able to set the pace and push that pace for the whole fight. And Colby really tested that. And this rematch, if it happens to be Kamaru and Colby, it'll be interesting to see because you have more time to prepare. You have more understanding of what you did wrong in that last fight. So it'll be really interesting to see. And that'll do it for your wrap-up of the UFC. Wish I could talk longer, but that'll do it. This has been Omar Alvarez and Brian Groth on Tiger Talk. We bring you the face behind Fort Hays State. Good night, and see you next time.